And welcome everyone to another OSR tabletop with myself, Gia Bloodworth, and waiting on a couple of guests. Hopefully they can jump on in. So I am going to put the link right in there, Shadow. So it is on its way. So invite guests, and there it is. So you can jump right in. And so let me set up a little bit of where I'm taking this. So this is a response video initially to Shadow and Sun, and you should be in a second. And then I followed up watching Shadow and Sun's video with watching Bo Paints Minis, Bo's response to Shadows, and then earlier on, about an hour ago or so, I caught Shadow's response, and in the interim, I was formulating my ideas of a response to Chasing the Dragon. All right, and my initial take from Shadow's point was that Chasing the Dragon meant trying to recapture the magic that our first experience with, whether it's Dungeons and Dragons or or another tabletop RPG, whether or not it is possible for us to recapture that magic that there was for us, that brought us into this hobby. In many cases, for many of us, certainly in my circles, 40 plus years ago, when we were young teens or even pre-teens. In my case, I was 11 or 12. And Shadow was talking in his, and I'll let him chime in a second. Shadow was talking in his initial video on the topic, and I suggest that you go to both Shadow and to Bo's channel and check those out. I will, after this is done, link them in there as well. But Shadow, and I'll let you correct me if I took it wrong, but Shadow was saying, part of the reason why that might not be possible to recapture that, recapture that feeling that we had is because we have changed. Obviously, over 45 plus years, we have certainly changed. And my pushback on that is that it's not so much that we as individuals have changed over time, but maybe the way we game has changed, and that's a slight, I think, difference that, that I'd like for us to, possibly delve into. Now, I'll let Shadow jump in and say, introduce himself, say hello, and in the meantime, I'll take a look at who's in the chat. I don't have sound yet. Yeah, I'll let you try to relog. Hey, Bo, how's it going? We're waiting for Shadow to relog in.
Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you clear.
Good.
Let me just say hello to the people that have chimed in. So let's see if Shadow's trying to get back in again. All right, I can see you fine. Let me hear you, Shadow.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're kind of low, but maybe that's on my side.
Yeah, you can adjust my volume if you.
Yeah. Let me just turn up my volume a little bit. Okay. And in the meantime, let me. My ear trumpet. Thank you very much, and Bob, congratulations on your free membership from him. Let's see what else we have here. Ducato, as always, great to see you. Hey, Ducato, if you want to jump in, you're welcome to jump in too. as a fellow retiree, you might have time to jump in. That'll be awesome. And Mayor Trumpet, again, thank you so much. So, a man cannot step into the same river twice because it is not the same river and he is not the same man. Yeah, and that I think was what Shadow was mentioned in his first video was that it might not be possible because we have changed as we have grown older and we have changed as individuals. I'll let Bo. I'm sorry. I'll let Bo jump in on that as well. Good morning, Bo.
Good morning. No, I think that my point was is that as it's and I think that Shadow made that allusion actually in his first video. It's that our experiences playing the games have is what have changed us, and where our whether it's growth or our perceived growth, our maturity. Shadow made allusions to being unwilling to take risks as players, and I think the point of my video was to regain some kind of maybe not innocence, but some kind of being willing to put off the rules of the game to play the game, because those are the things that we didn't have when we started. If you started as a 14-year-old with in 1985 with red and blue box Dungeons and Dragons, basic, or even earlier that with the Moldvay basic expert sets, then you didn't have the constraints of rules, and you weren't always chasing a +1, a +1, a +1. Uh, More willing to be in the game, be in the moment, and that was my point from the beginning. And if I deviated from yours and Shadow's points regarding, I apologize. I think that this is part of
No,
the
no,
natural progression.
yeah, no. What you're talking about, I think gets to part of the point that I was thinking about when Shadow brought up that we can't and as my ear trumpet said, you can't step into the same river twice, because we have changed, and my thought is that we can recapture, or at least attempt, we can attempt to recapture that early experience by playing the way that we used to. All right,
Right.
because and whatever that was, that's going to be very individualized. I
Mhm.
know both you and Shadow were talking about the differences between role playing, and I'll add a
Right.
third, role playing. Now, where is my third coming in? So, Shadow and both you, Shadow, and myself have the same definition for ROLL, playing. We're letting the dice determine everything. We're relying on the dice to, in some cases, think for ourselves. And it is a very mechanical, disconnected way of playing these games. All right. They're important, but they shouldn't be the driving force of it. And that gets to your point, Bo, where you end up chasing the +1s, right? And min-maxing and that. But min-maxing, I'm gonna make the argument that min-maxing wasn't something that most of us did back in the 70s and 80s. We really weren't, you know, I mean,
Well, you
and
couldn't.
again, maybe it's just my experience.
No, but I think min maxing really started with second edition AD&D with kits, because in earlier editions, if you're limited to 4 or 5 player classes, and you might get racial um, bonuses if you're not playing racist class, the well from which to draw your bonuses was much more shallow compared to again starting with second edition AD&D, at least in terms of Dungeons and Dragons.
With my experience, a couple of things. As soon as we were allowed to stop rolling straight down the line, that began the min max snowball. And coming from a huge white box and Arduin background, we had a crap ton of options and things we could do. I think the overall conclusion I've come to is that it's a mix of the three things we've talked about: regaining the way we played back in the old days, and it being so hard because we've changed so drastically. I mean, I started playing 47 years ago. That's 47, and mind you, my experience is very different because I've bragged before. I've had the luxury of playing almost every day, and if I wasn't playing, I was reading and studying. So I've been spoiled in that respect. So I played with a lot of people. So it's not quite equal measures of the three roles that you were talking about. It's we've changed, the hobbies changed, and how we play has changed. Back in the old days, my groups were more akin to role play, as in act and make the silly voices because we were little kids. We hadn't quite been told completely to stop making believe and pretending by our parents and our teachers. Stop goofing off. We were still on the cusp of still being allowed to go out and play, and instead of always on our bikes or something, we came into play, and at the table they figured, hey, they're doing math, so leave them alone.
Hey, Takano, how's it going? I'll
Good.
let you say good morning, and I'll let you jump in on this if you want to now.
Yeah. I'm coming in on the tail end of it. I'm kind of had the opposite experience of Shadow. Like when I was a kid, we used to just, looking back on it, it was just all about crawling dungeons and killing stuff and gaining loot. And now as adults, like our games have changed a bit because we do a lot more role playing now than we ever did. Like we have whole sessions that are just role playing. That's all we do.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I think it's very much depends on what group and how you guys. I
yeah.
remember going through the monster manual and being like, oh, we want to fight this thing. So we would go and fight that thing and stuff. And now the games are much more nuanced. Storytelling gets kind of a bad rap, but there's much more like stuff actually going on than just hacking down the next bad guy. Like
Right.
there's, machines behind the machines and stuff. And I do understand though that like the whole thing of like keeping it like fresh, which is hard, especially as you get more like that first time experience. And for me, like I guess on like a base level of that's why I've always like I've been running games since I started playing, 40 something years. And I always I'm a huge hoarder of like monster manuals. And I was always buying like different monster manuals because I wanted I don't want my players like to have to act surprised. I want them to be surprised. So they
Right.
Right, right,
know what
right.
the hell this
You
does.
know,
And now as a
We have the
more
art of them both.
experienced guy, yeah. So it's like now as a more experienced guys, I modify monsters. Like one of my players said one time, he's like, yeah, Stan can throw a zombie miniature on the board, but we have no idea what that
exactly. You know what?
is.
And that's something that I just watched Runehammer's video yesterday or the day before, and Runehammer is coming out with a toolkit for game masters, and one of the primary tools of that is that the monsters they have a generic stat block, but then all of their attacks and abilities and everything is randomized. So an orc isn't an orc isn't an orc. So anytime you're seeing something and you let the players roll what so they're rolling the two, like if it's a 2 hit die monster, they're going to roll 2d100, and that will establish what the monster's abilities are, and then so that way every single time they're encountering something like you were saying, Dakado, they're never quite sure what they're going to be getting. And that, I think, helps to recapture that first feeling we all had when we
That's
first
a part.
started
That's a
playing,
part.
because we didn't know. I vividly remember the very first time we played, down to the graph paper, the pencil, the type of eraser that my dungeon master had, because he had that rectangular cube, like cubicle eraser
Gum.
that used to crumble.
Yeah, the gum
You know,
erasers.
Yeah, and it
Yeah.
was like the most impressive eraser I've ever seen. And we came up onto a cave entrance where the entrance was too small for our fighter to get to wearing his armor. So we had to spend the time breaking open and moving some of the boulders. And we're using for the first time, our bend bars and lift gates thing, because we started with just the AD&D first edition monster manual and the player's handbook. The DMG didn't even come out yet when we first started, because that's the order in which they were released. So this would have been 78 or 79. All right. So I would have been, 78, 11 or 12 years old when we started. And we were a group of friends. But anyway, we opened up this thing and we went in, and then there was 3 tunnels branching out from this one entry room. And, he described the smell and everything like that. We had a fighter, a thief, a magic user, and a cleric. All right. And that's where I'm going to get to the role playing. By my definition, by my practice back then, was we played our roles. You know what I'm saying? So it wasn't so much that we were in character or doing this. We were in character as far as the fighter was bold. The fighter was always running right into the combat. Always, looking to see who was the greatest challenge and heading it on head on. The cleric was almost like a secondary fighter, because the cleric only had one spell, and the cleric, once that spell was used and he held on to that thing, for dear life. It was like only until you were down to 1 hit point was even thinking about casting that one spell. We didn't have but he was wearing the same kind of armor that the fighter was. He was a secondary spot, a secondary person. The magic user had one spell. All right. Once that was done, it was done. He better have a high dexterity, because he was resulting to
dodging.
He was and the missile weapons were either darts or they were silver bullets for a sling, right, to make them a little bit more useful. But that was the secondary role. And then the thief played the thief's role.
Right.
And so with all 4 roles working in, so were we in character? For the most part, no, because the other thing was that we didn't start with max hit points at first level. You got what you rolled. Yes, we did. We used 3d6, but placed as you wish, because that was AD&D first edition. It wasn't down the line, and we had
It was one option, and it was one option.
It was one of the option, but not the option. It wasn't option number 1, and so. But anyway, our characters died a lot. All right, I vaguely remember who my first 3 characters were, and then I had my main character that lasted for 10 years, and then my other handful of characters were just not memorable, because they all died at some point, and that was after years of play. So it was always that sense of you were playing the role of your character class to contribute to the team. The team was carrying out the quests, and you were letting the consequences of your actions, those choices were more indicative of what the result was going to be than even the die rolls were. You know what I'm saying? If you went down the wrong tunnel, you were going to die. That was basically it. There was a challenge there. We had to learn to run, more so than fight in a lot of cases. And I'll finish up with this last point. Neither of my first 2 dungeon masters allowed for resurrection or raising dead or anything like that. The gods will not give some piddly little cleric the ability to alter life and death. So every death was virtually permanent. There was no way around it. And so that's another thing that doesn't exist today. Yeah, and so that's why I'm saying the game style has changed more so than we have changed.
Well, stat blocks and things like that are a nice way to try to bring back some of that magic. But to my biggest point is that we've all learned through playing. The very first time we played, I hate to liken it to the other Chasing the Dragon, but the very first time we played, we didn't know what we didn't know.
Mhm.
And from that point on, it was a case of continual diminishing returns. We can't forget to check for locks. I mean, check for traps. Excuse me. And bring the 10-foot pole and buy the oil and the rope and all those things. The very first time we played and died, or the second time we made a character, we'd already begun learning from our mistakes, and
Right.
those mistakes, the learning process snowballed to where we are now. And I think that's why so many of us gravitate toward new games, because only there do we actually stand a snowball's chance of experiencing that, because we don't know what we don't know. If we start playing Traveler for the first time, we can read the books, but we still don't know what it's going to be like till we're actually at the table playing our new character, and asking questions, or looking around, or feeling the world out, and trying to figure out what can I do, what can I get away with, what are we going to do, because we've learned so much. We're all 40, 50, almost 60-year-old guys who, through the course of teen to now, not just have learned how to play better, more tactically. We can't forget that stuff. I mean, we literally have to try to be the bumbling idiot to get that back. We can't, you know, disconnect ourselves and our character. We are the character. No matter how hard we try to play somebody else, there's still a percentage of us in that character, and we're gonna, you know, use some of that experience one way or another. No matter how hard we try, we literally have to be, get the Men in Black flashy thing. Okay, forget all your D&D knowledge to be able to do it. And I was blessed early on. I had this great friend. His name was Richard also, and he, from the very beginning, he was his character. He was standing up, gesticulating and making speeches and monologues about what we were going to do, and doing the funny voices, and 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 being the character. And he helped uh, some of my players get into that, but a lot of
Mhm.
them just never could do it. Which goes to my point this morning, where there is that stigma of pretending, of make believe, of using the silly voices, or not just looking at it as a tactical adventure game where there is a way to win.
Bo, you wanted to jump in?
That's been a really interesting point. That might be the third point. Then I was thinking earlier about things that we could do to make the game more fresh, and I said you can act in character more. You can introduce new monsters, new mechanics. Like you said, the Dagato, is that right? And that's what I've been trying to do. I've been scouting through. The one thing I like about the OSR, and a lot of things I don't like about it, but you look at like BX compatible games, there are a lot of modules and monsters and source books to plow through for ideas and things that your players may have never seen. But the third thing that Shadow mentioned maybe is introduce the game to new players.
Mhm.
So you can get that fresh feeling vicariously. If you take kids that have only played 5e or maybe never played a role playing game at all, and I mean kids,
Yeah,
I
you're
mean people
stealing
that are
one of
maybe
my
in their
video ideas.
18,
Hold
19,
on.
20.
Stop. You're stealing one of my
No,
videos.
find people that have never played before and let them make all the bumbling errors and just enjoy it, whether you're a player. I tell you what, if I was at a table with 3 new players or 4 new players, I promise I will not spill the beans about
Yeah.
any weaknesses for monsters. I won't say you got to, how to beat the beholder. I will play along, and if my character dies, I will be giddy. I'll
What
be
what what
absolutely
what
giddy.
about the 10-foot pole? What about the oil flasks? All that
Well,
stuff.
again, what about not if you're playing AD&D? Don't put your ear against this, so the ear seekers don't kill save against death. There's a whole lot
So
of saving against death in old school D&D.
Yeah.
I had that experience, Bo. You brought that up. That's a good point. I was playing in this group with a friend of mine was running the game. He and I had played a ton of games. We still play together, but there was like I think three other guys. They had never played D&D. We were probably playing probably early third edition. I think it doesn't matter, but none of them had ever played before. So we ran. We played several sessions, and then one day after a game, I was hanging out at my buddy's house that was running the game, and he was like, "Hey man," he's like, "Is there something wrong?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "You're very quiet like during the sessions." And I'm usually not that type of player. And I'm like, "Dude, I am just enjoying the show because these people have they had no idea. Like you said, they didn't know what they didn't know. So I was just enjoying like the spectacle of watching them learn, and I didn't want to spoil any of it. I'm like, "Oh, if they want to go try that," and in my head, I'm like, "That's a horrible idea." But I want to see how that's going to play out. So let's watch them do that. And it was great. Like I was like, this is awesome. It's one of the most fun I had at a table. And another thing, like Shadow had said something earlier about introducing new games. And I had that experience too. Like during COVID, I played Call of Cthulhu like weekly online with some friends. Best campaign I've ever played in. Like it was awesome. But I remember in one encounter, we were in this cabin in the middle of nowhere, and this hound of Tindalos came in, and I had no idea what that was, but I knew from the reaction of everybody else on the screen this was not a good thing. And I remember talking to one of the players in between sessions. He's like, "I'm not going to spoil it for you." He said, "But it's bad. It's just," and
Right.
I was like, I got to experience that being new all over again. And I think new games are for veteran players is a really good way of trying to get back that little bit of that magic.
And like in all the years that I've been playing role playing games, I have intentionally saved myself from either reading or I have never read a module that I have not run. So like of all of the classic modules, I don't know almost any of them because I still want to play them someday. As a
Mhm.
player, I never did Village of Hamlet or Keep on the Borderlands or the Isle of Dread or Castle Amber or Ravenloft. Never did any of them because I want to have that experience for me.
Yep.
I've
Yep.
guarded it jealously. If I've watched a video and the video reviewer said, "Yeah, we're going to talk about this module," I've stopped it. I've
Yeah.
saved myself intentionally.
Yeah, I never, when I review
I
a
want to make
module
sure
or an
Bill's got back
adventure,
on it.
I never actually talk about the module itself and the elements of it. I'll talk about the layout of it or whatever, but I try to do it as completely spoiler free as I can. As a game master, I never run a module as written, so that because a lot of my players have been around for a long time. So like Shadow was with me when I ran a B2, So when I ran, were you with us for B2?
Nope.
Maybe not. You were with us
No,
when
it's
I
either
ran the setting
Temple.
of the Hill Giants.
Nope.
All right. No.
No, it was like I think Temple of the Reptile God or something
Oh,
like.
Cult of the Reptile.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah,
right.
yeah. I
Which,
was in that one, but I didn't know it.
yeah,
Did you
which,
run? Did you run us through Hamlet as well?
no, no.
Okay.
In the other, no, in the other campaign, yes. Village of Hama, and it was completely different. The
Mm-hmm.
whole story, the whole story behind it was different, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what I do. I basically use the maps. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
Well, regardless, I think my point was that I've tried to keep my experience as a player fresh.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well,
You
I did
I
the
keep
also
same
my
thing.
I keep my experience as a player fresh because I almost never get to play. It's like
and to be fair,
no,
Bo, you actually probably have the least play experience of all of us here, just because of not your choice, but I didn't have that 10-year gap of not playing. I
Oh,
literally
wait, no, only 10, more like 20-year gap.
okay. See, that's terrifying. That's like a fate worse than death to a guy like me. Even when I was in an area full of
Wait a minute.
rednecks who hated the idea and like made fun of me for bringing my books to work, so I could read them on my lunch break, didn't stop me. I was still on the phone with my bros back home, or writing up modules, or studying, or going to the game store, buying the latest thing, or buying some new thing. um I can't even imagine that. So in a lot of ways, you kind of uh made a good mistake, you know um
Yeah.
because I'm sometimes I'm a terrible player because I know too much, and but one thing I did learn is that, hey, grandma, as a GM, we need to go play, to keep it fresh, and remember what they're playing for. They're not playing to live out our story, they're playing to live out their story. And we kind of make that mistake all too often, especially with story gamers. It's uh, it's all about them. It's not about us. Without them, we're just failed writers.
Yep. Pretty much. Yeah. Spot on.
Yeah, I think one of the detriments in the hobby, for going, since the character sheets have gotten so complex, is that people are playing from the character sheet, and
Absolutely.
you
True,
know
absolutely, and especially in fifth edition, where you can take one level of anything, you
Oh
can
yeah,
make a potpourri of a
that
character, which was
concept
something
was
that we had.
so that concept was so antithetical to any sort of resemblance of reality.
yeah,
I mean, when could you do that? How do you
yeah,
train for that? How do you suddenly know how to
Uh,
use magic? It
yeah,
was just the ultimate example of role playing, a video game mentality,
mhm,
and giving the players whatever they want just to keep them at the table. If you have to work that hard, you got the wrong players. I mean, they should be
Yep.
overjoyed believe it or not, at the lack of sort of agency, because they're nobodies. They should be like loving the hard times. You know what I
yeah,
mean? I mean, I know a player, I'm not going to mention him, who absolutely loves the darkest, grittiest crap you can throw at him, because, as he says, his world was so great, his real life was
no,
so
that's not me.
devoid of that, that he loves that stuff. Sorry, that's my dog. Hold on, I'm
No,
expecting.
my real life was not great, but I love. I mean, I want to play. I want to play a campaign all the way through. I mean, I don't mind starting with the mud sword and one spell, and like you said, Bloodworth. If my one spell is, and I've got a for our Bears and Borderlands game, I rolled randomly for my 3 spells,
mhm.
and I took what I got, and I didn't
You
throw a
got
fit, and
shit.
I'm
You got shit.
I
You got
did
like
not. I got three. I got one utility spell. I got one good spell, and I got one mediocre spell.
what were those three spells for the audience?
Shield,
That's good,
um,
not bad.
read read magic, and ventriloquism.
Shield was the only actual useful
I
one,
got
but
I got one guy.
yeah, read magic should be default anyway. Every
I
magic user
know,
should
I
be able to
know.
read magic as a default. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? How do
Yeah,
you
how do
learn magic if you don't
how
have
are
You
you?
any
and yeah,
magic?
you and Shad have this argue. You and Shad have had this argument with me weekly. But I mean, but you don't get any spells by default in Bears and Borderlands.
I
How
know,
are you
but
a magic user without detect magic and read magic? How are you using it?
Well, why don't you change the game then? Why don't you make your own version, and then you can, or why don't you have the character
no,
find some spells in the next adventure to expand his repertoire?
just give the magic user or illusionist a default starting in their spell book
I normally do, but
that
Bo
they,
wants to
they
play a
just
hard
have
mode.
that. That's like saying
No,
that
because everyone's automatically going to. Every magic user is going to choose sleep and charm person as their, and then maybe either magic missile or shocking grasp. Shocking grasp in Barrows and Borderlands is a badass spell because
Oh,
remember you can cast a spell every single turn, and it does 1d8 plus your casting level in damage.
yeah,
Holy shit! And you can cast it every single turn until you fail. D8 for you,
And
D8
then
for
a race
you,
car
D8 for you. You got to make it to hit roll because you got to actually hit him. But if
And
you hit him,
if you fail that roll to cast it, you could erase yourself from reality, or
only if you roll snake eyes at first level. Only if you roll snake eyes.
Yeah.
You roll snake eyes, then you take a turn on the percentile chart of doom, where you can do things like get yourself turned into a sentient bubble until you pop and die, or
Let's
get
hope we get
teleported to the
physical.
moon, or have all your bones disappear. All kinds of Harry Potter shit. That D100
And-
table is the most.
and
That is the
Tony,
most Gonzo Arduin-esque table I've ever seen in my entire life. That
and
critical
I
failure spell is
you,
Chef's Kiss.
my starting spell slot or allotment of 3 spells in Barrows and Borderlands would include teleport because it's the greatest spell ever, greatest superpower ever. Oh my god!
But you've got like a 50% chance of taking a roll on that table of doom every time you try to roll it. Every time you try to use it at first
Yep,
level,
yep, yep,
at least 50% chance
yep,
of a critical failure.
yep.
Anyway, it's
Fun stuff.
that's and again, Bloodworth. This is one of the things that I'm trying to do is, in the Barrows and Borderlands campaign that I'm doing, I'm looking at implementing other compatible things to keep the players guessing all the time, because it's all basically BXD&D. Find any BXD&D, graft it on, and go for the ride. Keep your players guessing all the time, because they can't read all the books.
Nope.
Right.
Nope. So what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do to rectify this problem?
Um. First of all, you have to recognize that your experience is going to be very different from somebody else's, and so
My earphones died.
all right.
My battery's dying, so I've got to get off.
Take care, Bo.
Sorry, I'm having
No
tech
problem.
issues.
See you tonight.
Thanks for stopping in. All right.
Go subscribe to Bo if you haven't already.
Yes.
Seriously.
Yes. Yeah.
Bo
I
Thinks
will
Minis.
link all of those things. Yeah. So to like, how do we recapture it, or at least attempt to? First of all, we're recapturing it for ourselves. We're not going to be able to recapture it for the other people sitting at our table. So we'd have to actually ask each of our players, what was your first experience like? You know what I'm saying? Like as a game master, you're going to be looking at your players and saying, well, what was your first experience like? What was the most memorable thing for you? That could be like a session 0 kind of thing, right? Where you ask your players, what was the most memorable thing about your first experience? And then you try to recapture that. Are you going to get it 100%? No. Are you going to get it for yourself 100%? No. Because like you said earlier, Shadow, and in your video, we have changed over these decades too. So, we have decades worth of knowledge. We have, we're not going to capture that same, feeling of not knowing what to expect, and maybe that's partly a shame, that we can't capture that. Go ahead, Decado.
No, I think that's right. I mean, it's tough. I mean, I can only speak to like personal experiences and stuff. So like with my group, part of it was, again, what Shadow said, changing the game, right? So we played, I mean, I grew up playing AD&D before that, and then AD&D and all that stuff. Then we played 5th edition for a long time. And I grew bored of it and saw the flaws that I perceived. And we went back and we played Castle Crusades. And like the way I always described it to people, and my players that have played it know, or I think they feel the same way. It's like, yeah, we're playing like basically AD&D, but with a better rule set, and that's relative, I guess, but I consider it a better rule set. It's easier to play. So that's part of it. Like I changed the monsters around, and we went back, changed the game to a game that has more of that feel of the early days of play. So I mean, but you'll never do it 100%. Like you'll never recapture that 100%. You just can't.
Yeah.
No.
Shadow-san, we all have these experiences that we can't forget. And
well, we could drink more.
Yes, there is that.
Just throwing that out there. I don't drink, but I thought it was funny.
Yes, we have
one of the
changed.
things I did. one of the things I've done and I've been thinking about a lot lately, which is why I like Barrows and Borderlands, even Savage Swords, um, the world setting. If you're, and most of our experiences has been with the sort of stereotypical European medieval society, right?
Mhm.
You try playing, Oriental Adventures, Dark Sun. I created a water world where there's, like 90% water on the planet. So most of their adventure is shipboard, or occasionally they'll get to an island, or they'll be doing some stuff underwater. That changed things up for a bunch of, 50-year-old grognards who thought they'd played it all. Like, okay, well, tough guy, let's go play on a water world where, at any minute you can drown.
Yeah.
There's I mentioned Dark Sun. There's Ravenloft. There's a lot of great old settings that are drastically different from the stereotypical sort of Tolkien-esque medieval European fantasy world. We can try things like that
Yeah.
because that
No.
changes a lot of the environment. When you change the environment, that's why Jaws and Alien are always voted the scariest movie of the year for like since they came out. Because Jaws, you're in the scariest environment with the scariest thing out there. Okay, Alien, you're in the second scariest environment we can imagine, facing the scariest thing conceived as far as I'm concerned when it comes to like movie monsters. All the rest, Dracula, piece of cake. Alien, I'm running. So making them scared,
Mm.
literally. There's a reason why horror movies are so popular because people love to be scared as entertainment, and if you can scare them right off the bat with the environment, again, why Ravenloft and Dark Sun did so well because they thrust these even experienced players back then into these worlds that were terrifying.
Yeah.
Um, on that point where you're talking about like the, choosing worlds and everything. So I'm contemplating, sometime in the near future, starting an OSC campaign. So my first old school essentials campaign. However, it is going to be dramatically altered and thus change the experience of the players based on the world setting. All right. Because the world setting actually, I think, plays a tremendous role in the way that the players are going to interact with the game system itself. So Shadow's going to love this, I think, because this is going to be the next world setting that I utilize.
Yeah, very similar to what I'm running in Savage Swords, where
Yeah. So
magic is
yeah. So I am going to be using
not
the
your friend.
Arthurian Age. All right. So basically, Call of Atlantis's setting.
That's
Piece four,
what
which
I'm running.
means that even though I'm using OSC, all right, even though I'm using OSC, there will be no elves or dwarves or any of those
Oh, I'm out.
monstrous things. It's
I'm out.
going to be a completely human centric world with snake people in it, right? Serpent men in it, and those
Okay, I'm back in.
and those monstrous things from the mind of Robert E. Howard, rather than just there'll be still plenty of strangeness out there for the players to engage with, but world setting is something that in my early experience, I don't think we actually placed ourselves in Greyhawk, or at least our DMs did not place us in Greyhawk until the box set came out. So that would have been like
Greyhawk for about 2 years, but before
yeah,
that,
yeah. So
we just had to make it up, right?
yeah, we weren't even technically in a world setting when we played. It was like
Same.
you're in this castle, you're getting a quest, you're going to travel to this cave or this dungeon or this whatever. You're going back to the castle. The castle wasn't placed in any kind of a broader world setting, that I can recall. It was just, we were just dungeon crawling. You know what I'm saying? And it was just,
in the beginning, it didn't matter. You
No,
know,
it didn't. It was like I said, we were 11 or 12 years old.
Conti, I remember
It,
I did really bad in school. Okay, like really poorly. I had like ups and downs. And when I discovered the Player's Handbook and the Dungeon Master's Guide, I was going through a really bad period of, you know, caring about being in school. I didn't want to be there. You know, I hated it. And then I got the Player's Handbook, and then you know, 2 weeks later, I got to DMG because my dungeon master was so furious that I had gotten the player's handbook. I went out and got the DMG even quicker, mowed twice as many lawns. And when I started reading it, I'm like, oh my God, look at all this stuff I need to learn in school. You know what I mean? The Dungeon Master's Guide was such a great book for everybody because it showed you all these things that you needed to know to run a game. You know, all these things about the world that we never thought about as players and DMs. Is like, it's just a castle, and 8 miles away is the dungeon. That's all you need to know. There's a forest in
Yep.
between. We're gonna roll some monsters. All right. We didn't even know the names of these places, and then suddenly it all mattered. And then we got into like the next tier of the game where, you know, all these new opportunities and dangers and setbacks started occurring. Right. I mean, when you first played, did you worry about disease and age and, you know, all those other things? No, it
well,
didn't.
not age, unless we ran into a ghost, and then we're really worried about age. But
Right.
disease and poison and all of that stuff, yes. Because again, we had no resurrection in our game. The one time that and I've told this story many times. The one time that my dungeon master Adam finally allowed for there to be a resurrection scroll for a longtime player character, you know, who had died, and the player, you know, Steve begged him, just I don't care if it's part of a quest. So he's like, okay, there will be one rumored scroll of resurrection. All right. And he put it in the last chamber of the Tomb of Horrors. All right. So we lost an
So
entire
might as
party
well not put it there.
time we went in. So we had a TPK the first time we went in, which is why he recommended to us strongly, do not use your primary characters. You know, use characters specifically rolled up for this quest. They're going to go on the quest for the player character whose, you know, character died. And so total party wipe the first time. The second time we went in with 7, and we left with 3. My character being one of the 3 that survived, and it was my main character. I was like, all right, my thief is a 10th level thief acrobat. He's been, you know, he's survived through, you know, tougher challenges than this, and so I'm going to take him into there.
Thief
And
acrobat, huh? Wow.
after the first like 3 died, we're like, we got to go. I was like, we're heading back. I'm taking 1 coin, or I took 1 minor treasure item just to say that I left the Tomb of Horrors with a bit of treasure. And I was like, we're getting the hell out of here. And as we were escaping, that was like the slanting thing that you know, the slanting floor. And we just barely got off of that thing, and the 3 of us survived. 1 more person died on the way out, you know, and we're like, nope, we're never going after anything. That was one of the few adventures modules that we never conquered. You know, we beat so many other ones. That one, no chance of actually defeating it.
I actually got that dungeon module for Christmas for my little brother, which was like a real shocker. If you knew him, you'd understand. And I still have it to this day. And I ran it once, and yeah, the players noped out early on, and never has anybody ever once said, "Hey, let's go through Tomb of Horrors again."
Yeah.
Your player might as well. I mean, your DM might as well have said, "Hey, I'm going to just kill your characters off. Anybody mind, or would you rather just play Tomb of Horrors?"
Yeah. You know, it makes me think about, you know, the way the players of the hobby have changed. You know, there's starting to be a reemergence of it not being a stigma for player characters to die in, certainly not in convention play, and we're starting to see it. Like there was at this recent page, I believe that there was a poster, a bulletin board put up with all of the character sheets of all of the characters that had died, in convention play,
Yeah, they did
on
that
each
at
and every day.
Claricon as well.
Yeah,
It's sort
you know
of
what I'm
like
saying? And that is that's old school. That's getting that's asserting the
well,
old school
see,
mentality of, you know what, it's okay for your player characters to die.
well, a little different experience for me playing at the Unicorn's Lair, which is this game hall I got my start in. Uh, the DMs had this really, really nasty thing. It was like, your character died. Let me see your character sheet. And then from underneath the table, they break out their Bic lighter and light your character sheet on fire, um, right there in the game hall. And that was my experience. It's like, oh no, my character's really dead. I can't even like just like save it. So yeah, you guys were lucky.
Yeah, yeah, I was never the one to say, "Hey, we're going to tear up your character sheet at the table," but you know, and we certainly would spend the time to spend the role playing time to deal with the character death. But in a convention setting, I think it's really important to put it out there that, hey, these are the fallen, the fallen few, the wall of the fallen
Well,
has
that came that particular nasty
grandma out
habit came from the phenomenon of players losing a character and then just going to another game and playing the same character.
Yeah, which I mean, I don't. To me, that I don't mind that either. You just can't come back to my table with the same character. You know what I'm saying? What you
Mhm.
do with the character is fine. Um, but I think that there's a good there's a good
Nice.
a catharsis, let's say, of bringing up your dead character and putting your dead character on the board. At a convention,
Well,
space.
it's like kind of like a cross between a rite of passage
Yeah,
and and a sign, a badge of honor, and a sign of showing that you're big enough to take it. Because I've seen people cry. I mean, I've seen people throw raging fits, all the crazy things people might do over the loss of a character, fist fights. I've seen it all, and being able to Uh, how's the saying go? Risk it all on a game of pitch and toss, and lose it all only to do it all over again. You know, um, you know, real adults can do that.
yeah.
Children, and the immature and whatever, they'll lose their stuff over the loss of a character, and you just don't invite them back.
Yep.
But I think going forward, we're gonna have to accept some things and know we can't change certain things. I mean, unless somebody develops the flashy thing from Men in Black, we're gonna have to realize and maybe decide to if we want that feeling, we're going to have to pretend not just to play our character, but pretend to not know things that we know. I've had a few good DMs that would say, "Well, your character wouldn't know that." We need to bring that phrase back. It's like,
I've done that. I did that before, right? I did that with our AT&D campaign. It was like, nope, you're not going to win. That was a big one. I know Mirador was in here earlier, but that was my
I said,
that was my real sense of doing that player character separation. And that's the first time that I really came out and I was like, no, your character would know that speak with animals doesn't work with a were rat. All right, because a were rat is not an animal. A were rat is a monster. All right,
Sure,
and
sure. Hey, speaking of which, do you have players actually complain when you tell them stuff that they might or might not know, especially might know that they're forgetting, or your because your character comes from this world, you would know these things.
no, I've never had anybody. No, no one ever complains about you giving them something. You know what I'm saying? They'll complain when they feel like you've taken something. You know, or you've said no, you can't do that.
Because
Um,
I find that's the opposite side of that coin, because
yeah, but
uh
nobody ever complains about that. I've never heard of anybody complaining. You know, about now if you're spoiling something for them, that they might say, "Oh, I wish you didn't tell me that ahead of time," kind of thing. But I really haven't. I can't think of a time when I've had that kind of a conversation
because
with a
I find
player.
that there are, since you're playing this character that grew up, maybe on this world or another world or whatever, um, you know, whatever world you're playing in, they're going to experience and hear things that you can't role play every second of their day in their life. Little pieces of information or just daily things that we don't role play through, and so sometimes I have to take that into account. It's like, well, you kind of would know, this or that, or you know, but it works both ways, you know. But for this you know phenomenon, I think we're going to have to bring back that your character wouldn't know that,
Yep.
or maybe get them instead. If you want to meet them halfway, how would your character know this or that? Like, how would your character know how to use a 10-foot pole in a dungeon?
Well,
Because there's a lot
that
of.
I mean that I know that's just an example that you're giving, but
Mhm,
that's why you put it in the hands. I mean, that's how we did it. You put it in the hands of a thief
mhm,
because the thief would know that, oh, I'm using a 10-foot pole to search for traps, or secret doors or whatever from a safe distance away. So yeah, like you wouldn't give you wouldn't give the hammer and chisel to the magic user, that has a 9 strength. You know what I'm
mhm.
saying? It's like you're going to give it to the fighter, or best off the dwarf, as a, here, you carry the hammer and chisel. All right, because you're good at this stuff, and again, that goes back to my mentioning of role, as in the role of the character class.
Mhm.
Each character in the group should have a role that they're going to play, whether it's class based or whether it's team based.
Well,
That
that's kind of where the phrase or the concept of class protection comes in, uh, into our lexicon. We need to remind the thief that his job is to do this, the cleric's job is to do that, and I
Mhm.
do mean using the damn cure light wounds uh, as your first cleric spell. If you do, if you only have one cleric spell and you don't take cure light wounds, you just consign the party to death. Sorry, or at least somebody's
Yeah.
going to die because of that. The there's a whole lot of things that um, are going to happen in a dungeon, and our friend Omen is going to say, yeah, but protection from evil, blah blah blah. I'm like, yeah, well, what happens if you're in the dungeon with no evil? It's just monsters and unaligned, phenomenon and creatures. You just wasted that. But the roper or the carrion crawlers or the giant rats took out your mage, you know, and you could have saved him, but you went with the other choice. Now, mind you, any cleric who only walks into the dungeon in a more modern game without getting the wisdom bonus, um, you probably want to find another cleric. Just saying.
Yeah.
So you get two spells. Um, but
Go ahead, Takano.
No, I'm good. I'm good.
Oh, okay.
Press needed.
Yeah, I mean, it's a, you know, it's also another reason why I like starting new campaigns out at first level.
Yeah.
Because I think that it does, it does kind of get the players into the correct mindset of what that campaign's tone is supposed to be. Now I know that this is just exact opposite of what we just did with my new campaign, with my Dragon Slayer campaign, but you have been my players for some up to 4 years. We have done how many campaigns starting at first level? So, but if I had a group that was predominantly new players to me, I would have never had you start off at second and third level. I would have had you start off at first, because those players need to learn about my style and my,
sure.
way of doing things and the way that I kind of set up the world. Um, but starting at second and third level, this is kind of a forewarning, is that and it goes to like what Takano said earlier. Yeah, you cannot expect that monsters are as monsters are in the book or whatever. Things are going to have their own twist to it based on the world setting, based on like Barrow Maze has a very very different take on undead that the Dragon Slayer monster manual section does not do.
Mhm.
So yeah, not every zombie is going to move at 20 and and have one attack that's a slam attack. You know what I'm saying? It's you might encounter ones that are very very different. And I've always done that.
Yeah.
With
I do that all the
changing
time.
things too. I think it's important to do it. I think it's important to take from other game systems, like Dakota was saying. He's stocking up on monster manual, so you might face a ghoul from Call of Cthulhu, which is a very different, very different thing.
Staccato, do you have any Arduin books yet?
I don't, but my son, for this last Christmas, backed their Kickstarter at the highest level for me
You were in
for
for a treat.
my Christmas. So I'm really excited. I can't wait to get it.
Holy cow, Squirrel!
Um,
Thank you so much. That's
I
huge.
I met those guys
Yeah.
at um, Emperor Choice guys at CNY, so they're good dudes and stuff. So
Duty function has been blurred. Yes. Yeah, delineation between class duty and function has been
Well, yeah,
blurred.
a lot of games are trying to let everybody do everything, and that's
Yeah.
that sucks.
It's the height of like and I think I have to check his video on it, because I think Legion of Myth, or maybe that's tonight's topic, is player agency and how player agency has destroyed the landscape of tabletop role playing.
That was one of the things, like when we left. That was one I have a laundry list of complaints against fifth edition, but that was one of the things on that list. And when we went to CNC, one of the things that was great is great, is that every class, the core classes, is distinct, right? So like you don't have a cleric like we did in fifth edition that was better in the woods than the ranger in the party, because he
Right.
just had a better wisdom and he had the survival skill, and because he had a better wisdom than my ranger, he was actually better at survival, all that
That's
stuff. And I'm
wrong.
like, this doesn't make any sense.
That's
So you go to
true.
like Cast Crusades, and if they're missing like one of the core classes, like excuse me, if like the cleric isn't there, they're like, oh crap, nobody's just like throwing out random healing, because there isn't people
Well,
that just have spells for no reason, like
Right.
you have four classes that can cast
yeah,
spells, and that's
and
it.
to what Merlin was saying, if that is the case, Sean, you need to either do one of several things: get a second cleric, uh, have some sort of binding wounds mechanic, or better yet, which is like blows my mind that there's not such a thing like the old Dragon magazine healer profession, combat medic. No group that I've ever worked with that went into combat did not bring along a guy who could stitch them up. You know what I mean? You were literally just saying, "Oh, we're on a suicide mission. All right, I'm in."
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
all
and
characters die. You're just making it so that they die as quick as possible without having some form, some mechanic, whether it's magical or not. I don't care. But if you don't address the healing issue,
yeah.
if you've ever been hiking or in the woods or in a outdoor situation for more than a couple of days, I got this little boo boo on my hand in the wild, that could be a death sentence. One
Yeah.
splinter, one little scrape that's not taken care of could literally kill you. I know a guy who freaking almost died from a splinter in his hand that was untreated for too long until it swelled up to where he couldn't even close his hand from a tiny little splinter. He didn't even know what caused it until he went to the doctor in the emergency room, and they opened up his hand and found out what had caused it all. You need a healer. It doesn't have to be the cleric, but for 99.999% of the hobby's existence, it was the cleric, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. You guys were in the military, right?
Yeah. Everybody had a certain amount of, first aid training and
Mhm.
and that kind of thing, from
Every squad
CPR to
had one.
putting on a tourniquet or whatever. I
Something.
mean, yeah, just like everyone was a rifleman, everyone, we were all trained in certain like core things, but you weren't going to replace the combat medic. You know what I'm saying? It's like, you weren't going to replace, you weren't going to replace the, necessarily the more
Sure, sure.
highly trained people for certain things. Like you weren't trained to use every kind of weapon system. I mean, that's why we had separate trainings for things.
Exactly,
You know,
exactly.
yeah, you could jump on a machine gun and start firing it off. Do you know how to reload it? Do you know how to do this? Do you know how to clean it? Do you know how to, when to change the barrels and things like that? No, because you didn't go to crew weapons, crew served weapons training. That's where you learn how to do that.
Right,
You
right.
know,
But
so
most games don't have like a everybody can bind wounds. Later,
right.
they start throwing the bandages in, and that comes
That
with
comes with second
how to use
edition. With
them.
second edition, you start coming up with those secondary skills, and that's
Or
where
the Wilderness and Dungeoneers survival guides had the
yes, I
healing
had that as well. You're correct. Yes.
and
So
because the other thing that I found kind of weird is that you could rest in the wild and heal. I don't think that's quite how the human body works. You really need a little bit more than just sleeping in a sleeping bag for 6 hours to get your hit point back. You know, that's me. And yeah,
yeah,
Sean, without one, you kind of have the other. You
yeah.
know what I mean?
They can choose to go. Yeah, they can choose not to bring a healer into the party, and it's manageable. But it changes the way, it changes the tactics that the party has to utilize. Just knowing that fact
Yeah.
that they no longer have that asset, just like the cleric player character, that character needs a backup once their spells are used up for the day. And we knew that back from the very first time that we played D&D. The magic user, once he cast his one spell, he better have some kind of a backup to make him useful. All right. There was no, I'm going to just stand here because I have nothing else to do. No, bust out that sling and start throwing stones, even if you distract something with it.
Well, you guys have mentioned that multiple times. I don't know. In my experience, I didn't play BX, but in AD&D, you couldn't use a sling as a magic user. Where does that come from?
That came up.
Oh, you could.
It's funny you mentioned that because I just had that conversation this morning with somebody else. I'm like, in AD&D, they could not use slings. They could use a dart, a dagger, and a staff, and that is it.
There was sling
And
staffs.
but
Did that come
a
later?
lot of people think that, and I'm
I
like,
thought they
nope.
could
I
do.
just looked it up. I just looked it up again this morning. I was having that conversation
And
with
they couldn't
Roger,
use slings.
and they can't use slings. They can use dagger, dart, and staff. And
What was the
I'm like, I
rationale
don't know if
behind not
I'm
being
gonna
able to
I'm gonna
use
check the
slings?
unearthed to see if because that's where the sling staff that you mentioned. But I could swear, caltrop, dagger, dart, knife. Oh, okay, it must have been unearthed that it happened.
Oh, sling.
Yep,
All right.
and on Earth they added the sling.
yep. Because I'm like, when did that happen? Because I mean,
And
nobody ever.
Unearthed was what 83.
I don't. I just
Well,
put it.
no, wait, no, but everything in Unearthed was in a Dragon magazine
Mhm.
first.
But then you got to also remember that unless your magic user had a decent dex,
Well, that's
um,
what I said. But the
a first level.
Dex was a secondary stat for every Magic user I ever played.
Yeah, see, for everybody, I knew it was Constitution, not Dex.
Well,
And without a Dex bonus, a Magic user has a 50-50 chance of missing an armor class 10 first level
Yeah,
through sixth.
but with the Dex bonus, they also have a protection of the extra armor,
Sure,
the extra armor class and everything. That's why I never treated Constitution as the secondary for a Magic user, because
Really.
getting plus one to hit points is
Or
less
two.
valuable than having a plus one to your armor class.
I don't know. I mean, because they
You're almost never gonna get hit for just 1 point of damage.
oh
So
no, you might get
if
hit.
you avoid getting hit by that
3
one
or
pip
4
on
or
the
5.
20 d20 die roll,
Hold on a second.
then
Someone's at my door.
you've avoided all of the damage. All right, let's see. Yeah, we used it like I said earlier. We used a lot of what was in Dragon magazines, which eventually ended up in Unearthed Arcana. So we were actually using a lot of those rules, maybe as early as like 1980. Those things, because I don't know exactly when. Like slings for magic users were in Dragon magazine, but
I don't know, but apparently they're in Unearthed Arcana, which
yeah,
I haven't checked that.
and like I said, virtually everything in Unearthed Arcana was originally in a Dragon magazine article.
Yeah, we used it. I didn't know like Unearthed Arcana was bad until the internet. Like we just used it.
Unearthed Arcana is an awesome resource.
Yeah,
It's an incredible resource. I like a lot of what is in Unearthed Arcana. I mean, there are a few classes that are a little bit too niche, like the Cavalier. The Barbarian is phenomenal below level 8, and above level 8 or 9 or 10 or whatever. It's like you would have been better off being a fighter. It's only good at lower levels because you have all of that additional hit die and everything. But the Cavalier was like, if you weren't mounted and using a lance, you were kind of useless. You were a one-trick pony. Pardon the pun.
The only thing with the Cavalier that was they made in Unearthed Arcana, they made the Paladin a subclass of Cavalier.
Yeah.
So it got like all the Cavalier abilities. Plus, we never had anybody play one, but like holy crap! Like what a badass.
Yeah. No bards and no psionics. That was always my thing too. I've never used psionics. I have never used psionics. In any of my games, never used it as a player. Never used it in my games. Never liked it.
Oh yeah, I used all of that. Bards were so popular that I had to actually make a caveat that allowed halflings to be bards. and psionics were always a thing in my game. As soon as I got my player's handbook and I read that chapter, I'm like, oh my god, because I was reading the Darkover novels at the time, which is a huge D&D. Well, it's a sci-fi fantasy, and it had psionics, and I was always interested in psychic powers growing up, and all kinds of weird stuff. And I looked at the abilities and the monsters that had them. A lot of people forget that things like demons and devils and other things had psionics. Therefore, they had all. You could roll up other powers that they would have in addition to in the monster stat block. They
Right.
could do this, gate in demons and all those other abilities. Well, if they've also got psionics, they might have psionic blast, or they might have telepathy, or that power. I forget what it's called, but it basically allowed you to regenerate or heal yourself,
Hmm.
like really fast, like crazy fast, to where your demon could literally be completely healed every round, even after taking like 30, 50 points of damage. Up, he's back. Up, he's
Yeah.
back. Okay, now he's done. He's out of psionic points. Okay, now he's going to fight a little differently.
Yeah.
Um, I always use them. I'm always gonna. I have my players roll. I just don't tell them I'm having them roll because players lie when they know they're rolling for psionics. Uh,
Oh yeah.
Amazed how many players roll up psionics, thinking I don't know that they're cheating. No, oh, you got psionics. Wow, you had a 3% chance and you got them. Yeah, right. Uh, yeah, that's a whole nother topic.
All right. Let's see. Yeah, so let's try to peel back to our original thing, chasing the dragon. So attempting to recapture those early experiences. I think you could do it, but it would take some work.
Oh, it does for sure.
I Yeah, I think that you can recapture that possibly with new players too, like players that have never played D&D. And I think you could get away with using a newer system, but still an OSR system. Like you could not use 5e and convince them that they're playing D&D BX. You'd have to strip out way too much, but you can get them to the point where
Nice.
you want them to have to rely on preparation before going into a dungeon. And you can role play that with the ROLE, as far as having your team makeup. You can role play that ROLE as far as you know the players are going to have their characters work out their tactics for when they go into certain situations and have that pre-planned. Then they're going to do their shopping. Obviously, all of this being done in between sessions and not during a session, but they're going to, plan out, hey, who has the iron spikes? Who has the mallet? Who has the sledgehammers? Who has, the 50 feet of rope and this and that, and just plan out and just be prepared for when they go into, the dungeon.
Yeah, that's kind of going in the opposite direction, though, isn't it?
No.
I mean, over planning is a mindset of players who played so much that they know what to plan for.
No, but the player characters are adventurers.
Sure.
All right, they have, through their training to become first level, have been trained to know that these are the certain things that you're going. That's the other thing, is that adventuring classed characters are like the top 3%.
Oh,
Of the
I
world. They're
absolutely
the
agree,
cream
but
of the crop.
I think that's like a more modern realization. Back in the old days, a lot of times, and not in a lot of other games as well, the player characters were the great white hope of their village or their town, whatever. They were the people thrust into these situations, and maybe they really weren't actually adventurers. He was just a soldier. He was just a priest in training. The magic user, they just yanked him out of school because they needed somebody, and this guy was in the jail cell, caught for breaking in and entering, and they threw him together, sort of your Kelly's Heroes, the Dirty Dozen kind of thing, to because part of the magic was the not knowing, you know what I mean, and
Yeah,
knowing that kind of chunk of information takes away from, I think, the magic of what we had, which was the fear and the not knowing what to do and having to figure it out for the first time, not having a routine. Okay, you're doing this, you're doing this, you're doing that. Having to find that out for the first time and figure it out the hard way, I think, was part of the fun that we can't get back.
yeah, but they still went in with adventure gear.
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that's what I'm saying. Is like that's the preparation. They might not know how they're going to really perform with one another until they understand what each other's abilities are. So that won't be the first session, but that'll certainly be the second, third, or certainly by the fourth session. They better have that down. Um, but yeah, I'm looking at some of the things too. So let's
Yeah,
see.
because like for example, I remember the first time um, I handed out a pre-gen to someone, I forget from what, and they had a mirror, the metal mirror, right? And they didn't know what the hell that was for. And I'm like, well, you're gonna have to figure it out, I guess, because even I didn't know all of its uses. I knew a couple, obviously for a Medusa, but there's things like looking under doors. If there's enough room, you could look under the door. Signal mirrors and blinding monsters out in the woods. If there's any sunlight, you could use the mirror to try and shine it in the monster's eyes. The use for the 10-foot pole wasn't just tapping on the floor. If the DM would allow, and your 10-foot pole was stout enough, you could use it to suspend bags of treasure. Like a pole between two NPCs and carry it. If you had two of them, you could then take a couple of bags and turn it into a makeshift stretcher. You could pole vault, I suppose, over the pit. You could try, different things. It wasn't just the tapping on the floor. I actually taught Joe the lawyer that we would take a 10-foot pole and shave it down just a little bit at the end so that you could take it and put it at the beginning of a hallway. And if it would roll down the hallway, you would know that the hallway was slanted. You guys ever done that one?
No, I never done that one, but
I mean,
one thing my first DM allowed us to do was to have a 10-foot pole crafted to where it could be separated into two 5-foot pieces. Because it never made sense. Like, how are you carrying that damn thing? If you're
Yep.
if you're
Yep. We also have
section it
the
off.
collapsible telescoping 10-foot pole, which is ridiculous because at the very end of it, it's worthless to actually tap and get any sort of
Right.
actual resonance, from trying to detect pits or activate other traps because you're not getting enough
played,
weight on the end.
we played some Dragon Slayer last summer. That's what my son ran for us, and man, we used the hell out of 10-foot pole. I think we even had one that we crafted, like you could put a thing on, like a hook on the end of it,
Yep.
so like we could reach in and like pick stuff up
Yeah.
and more easily. And I
Mhm.
remember we had an occasion we were playing in Highfell Mega Dungeon there, Greg's Highfell, and
Mhm.
man, like I think we didn't have one, and it was like, I mean, man, we were getting nuked with traps, and
Yeah, yeah, and
we lost
again,
our party rogue.
yeah, it gets you back into that old school feel when
Yeah.
your equipment actually matters, or the lack of it actually has an impact on you, and that, I think, is what we're really trying to get back to, is chasing the dragon for me is to think about the things that made it magical, the first time that we played, and to have that, to have that, not knowing full well of what every challenge is going to be. So like if I encounter an orc, you know,
Mhm.
I shouldn't know, oh, he can have as many as 8 hit points. He's a one hit die monster. He's a what
Mhm.
and therefore whatnot, and most likely be, using a scimitar, and that does this amount of damage, and having all of that stuff. No, I want to encounter I want to encounter an orc that has a laser beam for eyes, and all kinds of like just bizarre gonzo stuff that you would never. Or it's not an orc, it's actually something that's polymorphed to look like an orc, and then all of a sudden it is something else. Or
Yeah.
and just to change it up a little bit and to recapture some of that, those unknowns.
Mhm.
That's why the first adventure was called In Search of the Unknown, right? You're going into the
I'm
unknown.
getting ready to run that one soon.
Yeah. So it's
That's
a
one of my top three favorite dungeons of all time. Uh, the ability to make it different, and the way it showed you how to keep doing that through every
yeah,
other module. You know, change up the monster, change up the treasure. Those are two things right off the bat. And then change up the traps that would make any dungeon completely different. Because only White Plume Mountain really had features in it that you wouldn't find anywhere else, right?
Yeah.
Uh, that's my favorite module from TSR, anyways, is White
yeah,
Plume Mountain.
Yeah, we played that the most.
But uh, most of it is. It was something I was thinking as a way, and I know this sounds like everybody's going to be like, "No, I'm not. That's the last thing I'll ever do to get back to Magic," and that's taking a break. You know,
yeah,
uh, playing another like instead of playing fantasy, go play some sci-fi for a year and come back. Go
yeah,
play Call of Cthulhu. Not my favorite, but it's vastly different in every way than D&D. Even though
Oh yeah.
games are trying to incorporate H.P. Lovecraft's monsters into every freaking franchise, imaginable, or play chill, which is another way to go, or play a superhero game, or play Top Secret. Yeah, I know no one's ever going to do that ever in the history of ever. No one's ever going to play that game.
the
But
new
play.
ones, the new Top Secret is actually pretty good.
I looked at it. I didn't like it. I think
Yeah,
second. I think 2E was better. It had way more to work with, and like 50 freaking supplements. For my money, that would be the way to go. But play a completely different genre game. Cyberpunk, something. You know, because I know that if you do that, because I've done this, going back to playing a D&D kind of game after a big long hiatus or a break or playing something else will definitely uh, bring back some nostalgic feelings and some of that other magic that's missing. Just because especially like if you don't want to play the other game and everybody's like, okay, we're playing Cyberpunk for the next year. All right, fine. Or not play, um, or find another group. That when you come back, you will be like, oh yeah, I'm back. You know what I mean? You'll get that kind of part of that feeling that we're looking for, or you change it up so drastically that it is a brand new game.
yeah. We're getting a bunch of shout outs for different game systems. Gamma World, Star Frontiers,
I,
Traveler,
I, I have them all. I would gladly play all of them.
Boot
Uh,
Hill.
uh, as long as it's third edition, Boot Hill, sign me up. If I had the time, I literally play a different game every day, sometimes two on Saturdays and Sunday.
I have Aces and Eights someplace as a PDF somewhere.
I actually have. Hold on. I think it's called Wild West by.
Mark Hunt.
Hey, let me double check on eBay. It was just delivered. Um, and it's Wild West by Fantasy Games Unlimited. I don't know
Oh,
the author's name. It's the box set from
Yeah.
the Fantasy Games Unlimited, same people who put out Village of Vigilantes. Let's see, does it say on the cover who wrote
I'm
it?
not familiar with that game.
I just ordered it and got it. It's a 40-year-old game, still shrink wrap for $15 because
Yeah.
nobody wants to play Wild West.
Well, nobody's heard of it before.
You know,
So it's like, yeah.
there's probably that too, or they're
Yeah.
all no longer with us. And I've got the new Deadlands. I just got the FedEx number from the Kickstarter. That's coming. Unfortunately, I'm selling it as soon as it arrives because of what they did and why they did what they did. So that was kind of a drag.
All right. I am, gentlemen, thank you so much. I got to run.
Me too.
Gotta
Go
go,
run to the post office.
gotta go prepare for the big snowstorm. So,
Good luck, guys out
yeah.
there
Yeah.
who are expecting 20 plus inches of snow and negative 50 degrees.
Yeah.
I didn't know you died and went to hell. I will send flowers.
Well, yeah. It's, that's why January is just a tough month in New York. Definitely a tough month. In the Northeast, it's a tough
Mhm.
month too.
It's not cold. Well, it's 24 degrees here now in Maine,
Yeah.
right
Well,
where
it's
I'm at.
balmy. It's
bad.
balmy, right? It's
Buckaroo, I once played Dungeons and Dragons in the Pacific Ocean, boogie boarding with my friend Tony. So awesome. No dice,
all right,
but
guys. Thanks a lot, and yeah, we'll keep on this topic and keep on. We'll revisit it and
absolutely.
see. See if
Whatever it comes
anyone's
up with.
actually managed to kind of capture at least some of that feel again. With our current campaigns and whatnot. So yeah, it should be a lot of fun to think of it that way. All right, Staccato,
Have a trail,
Shadow,
guys.
have a good one.
You all.
Both earlier on.
Everybody.
Thanks to everyone in the
Be
chat.
safe.
Thank you so much, and you all have a great rest of your afternoon, evening, and